When do you use the story method? Now, at the end of the day, you can use any memory technique out there to memorize any information, but some techniques are better depending on what the information is. So I want to explain when I use the story method and why I use it on a specific type of information. So let's say we're memorizing some names. Now with names, it's kind of like a story method slash peg system hybrid. So I use their face, a characteristic on their face, as the peg, change the name to an image, create a little story, right? Story method, between the image and the characteristic. So Mary, maybe it's like a wedding cake, and I picture that, boom, all over in her hair. Okay, it's just everywhere. So this is what happens. Mary is first, right, in this list of all these names and faces. But what happens when I go to recall? She's not first. So this randomness on when she would appear lets me know, hey, use the story method, because their face, the characteristic, is the trigger to the images and to the story I created. And so I don't think about any of this stuff. I can't really find the information until I see the face. So I'm like, oh, her hair, Mary. That's right. There was a whole bunch of cake in it. So when you meet someone in the real world, what happens? You memorize their name. You might never see that person ever again. It might be a week, might be a month, right? So it's so random on when you might use that information. And it's that, when will I use this information, or when will the trigger come into my line of sight? And so I'm able to remember all of those images and stories I created. That lets me know the story method is the right method to use. Because if I try to use a memory palace for this, well, guess what? I memorize all the faces in one specific order, but they don't appear in the same order, so I'm just jumping around the palace. And depending on what the palace is, how long I've been using the palace, all these different things, I might mess up because I'm constantly jumping around, and I might miss a name and face here and there. And so I wouldn't want to use the memory palace because the order is not the same. Now let's say I'm memorizing some dates. Now it's kind of the same concept. You have this event, then you have this date, and when you recall it, it's in a different order. Okay, but let's say I have all these dates, but they're from 1300 maybe to like 1350 or something. And so if that's the case, I would use a memory palace because there's order to it. This event was first, this event was second, and so on. But in this case, it's random. And so when I go to recall, so brain power new energy source, 1340. And so when I go to recall, that event is probably not going to be the first one. There's always a chance it could be, but John rises again, it's not. And so that randomness, hey, use the story method. You don't know when these events is going to pop up, in which order. You need to use the story method. And even if I'm memorizing something like different questions, kind of like trivia questions, I would still use the story method. But there's an exception. Look, there's 10 easy icebreakers, right? And so I have 10. It's a set amount. Hey, there's 10. I'm going to use a memory palace. The reason I use a memory palace is because there is a limited amount. So there are 10 of these. I'm able to know exactly how many chances I have to use this, because if I use number 1 the first time, hey, I'm going to use the second icebreaker, and so on. And so a story method doesn't make sense here because there is a limited amount, and I need to know these 10 easy icebreakers by heart, right? I have to use them right away. So if I use the story method, guess what? I only can recall what the answer is if I'm given the question. And so if I want to use this as an icebreaker, it really doesn't work if I'm like, okay, hold on. Let me look at something real fast. Oh, that's what it was. Right? A memory palace, I'm able to have the question in my head because I'm able to walk through all of the different locations and see the images. But if I'm trying to memorize all of these questions, I'm going to use the story method because I don't know at what time I'm going to get one of these specific questions asked. So for me, at the end of the day, it's all about randomness. If something is random on when I will use it, I'm going to use the story method. Vocabulary, right? I don't know when I'm going to see a vocabulary word. I don't know when I need to use one. And so for me, the story method is the right time, because if I memorize a whole bunch of vocabulary words just using the story method, and I'm reading and I see it, I'm like, oh, that word, it triggers it for me. So I'm able to get the answer. So in these cases, when I need the answer is when I see the information, okay? When I see the other part of the trigger. So, oh, what does this vocabulary word mean? Oh yeah, I see all my images. Boom, I'm able to use it. And so that's how I use the story method. Now, it might seem like it's a little bit maybe tiresome or something on when I should be using it or not, But for me, I found that's the most effective way when if I have to recall the information and it's a random recall and there's really no order to it or structure, then the story method is the best place. Otherwise, I would probably use a memory palace. But I would love to hear how you use the story method. Do you use it in the same aspect, or do you always use it regardless of the information has order to it or not? Because everyone does something differently, and that's what's so cool with memory techniques. And that's why I want to share how I use it, because maybe I'm doing something that makes more sense to you. Like, man, that's how I should be using the story method. Maybe you're doing something like, man, that's way better. No, why haven't I thought about that? And so let me know if there's a specific way you use the story method. I would love to hear it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.